Thanks for the ride, Uncle Ben.
Oh, wait a minute, Peter. We need to talk.
Oh, we can talk later.
Well, we can talk now, if you let me.
But what do we have to talk about? Why now?
Because we haven't talked at all for so long. Your Aunt May and I don't even know who you are anymore. You shirk your chores. You have all those weird experiments in your room. You start fights at school.
I didn't start that fight. I told you that.
Yeah, well, you sure as hell finished it.
What was I supposed to do? Run away?
No, you're not supposed to run away, but... Pete, look, you're changing. I know. I went through exactly the same thing at your age.
No, not exactly.
Peter, these are the years when a man changes into the man he's going to become the rest of his life. Just be careful who you change into. This guy, Flash Thompson, he probably deserved what happened. But just because you can beat him up doesn't give you the right to. Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Are you afraid that I'm going to turn into some kind of criminal? Quit worrying about me, okay? Something's different. I'll figure it out. Stop lecturing me, please.
I don't mean to lecture and I don't mean to preach. And I know I'm not your father.
Then stop pretending to be.
Right. I'll pick you up here at 10.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and welcoming a new guest today, and that is August Aguilar. August, how you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great. Thanks, Perry. I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited.
Well, thanks for accepting the invite. I'm excited too. Thanks to you, we are finally closing the book on the Raimi films, and we've gone in reverse order, actually. We started with Spider-Man 3, then a few months later we did Spider-Man 2, and now finally we're doing the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man from 2002.
Which is so weird to me because I thought for sure when I was looking at your list, I was like, oh man, I don't know what to pick. I saw everything was like already taken, and I was like, oh man, well, Spider-Man, the Raimi trilogy especially, is kind of really close to home for me. So I was like, when I got down to that list, I saw the first one wasn't there. I was just so surprised because that one I felt like would be up for grabs right off the bat, you know, one and two, especially.
It's funny because, well, I mean, the first part of this show, like the first 60 episodes, I was doing it with my late co-host, and we were going back and forth. We would, one of us pick a movie one week, the other one pick the movie the next week. And he always liked to go for, sometimes he liked to do the big budget stuff, the ones that are more well-known, but sometimes he wanted to go for the more obscure stuff that people haven't really seen. So especially early on, we didn't get to a lot of the big ones. And then now, since I've been having the guest format, I think a lot of people were probably like you. They probably just assumed, oh yeah, he's probably already done like Spider-Man and the Dark Knight and all that. But yeah, those are actually two movies. We still haven't done the Dark Knight actually either. That's one that's still a big hole in here too.
That's another. I mean, that would have been another one. I'm like, yeah, dude, Dark Knight. I could talk about that all day, you know.
Yeah.
But me and my friends, my co-host on my podcast, we talk about the Sam Raimi trilogy all the time, and it's just funny because after we just got done talking about that, and then me and you touch base, and I saw your list and it wasn't there, and I was like, oh, this is so perfect. And I just rewatched Spider-Man 1 and 2 just like about like 2 or 3 weeks ago, but it was just it's just one of those things where it was like everything kind of at the same time clicked. I was like, wow, that's pretty neat. So.
Always nice when that happens. But before we jump too much into the movie, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a filmmaker. I run a production company called Strange Films. So we do a lot of independent horror films mostly. We kind of do like the Marvel storytelling approach where it's like everything's existing in a shared universe. So there's a lot of different characters you'll see pop up every once in a while, or there's like sequels to some of these films and just things like that. But everything, even if you're watching a standalone approach, like it's very friendly as far as anybody watching. Like anyone can just pick up anywhere and watch. But Strange Films expands not only from the movie side of things, but we adapt our movies into comic books. Since I'm such a comic book nerd, I grew up reading comics and everything as well. And so we do comic books, we make music and art, and we do podcasts and everything as well. So it's a multimedia experience. I try to pitch it as a multimedia production company. But yeah, that's what we do. We make. I'm the director and creator of everything, so I'm pretty much, my hands are on every single project, and I'm just trying to get our stuff out there.
Awesome. So, with these horror films, what's the kind of like style? Like, is it like supernatural horror? Is it like, more real world style horror? What kind of feel do you go for with them?
It's a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, so I can say firmly that the style and aesthetic of all the films, everything you watch is really 70s and 80s horror, like John Carpenter. Just in that vein of filmmaking and direction. But as far as like the themes of what's going on in every movie, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. So we've got movies that involve like serial killers. We've got things that are like creature features. We have like demons. We've got aliens in one of them. We've got just like your run of the mill crazy person, just like anything that is, I think we call strange or bizarre, is kind of where I fall into the category of our work. It doesn't have to be something so specific, but it's
Hmm.
definitely influenced very much so by the 70s and 80s. So like I have one film that's like super influenced by Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original. And my newest film I just made is very much influenced by John Carpenter's Halloween. So it's just, those kind of aesthetics you'll see consistently throughout all of our work, but it's a lot of different kinds of characters and themes going on throughout it.
Awesome. Where can people watch these too?
Yeah, so all of our films are available to watch anytime for free on our website, strangefilmstudios.com, or you can go to YouTube and just look up Strange Film Studios, and you'll find all of our films on there. Like I said, they're free to watch. They're anywhere from, we mostly they're short, so anywhere from 5 to like 26 minutes long. But the newest one I just put out is called He Comes to Kill, and it's 50 minutes long. So it's our first micro feature film that's out, and it's actually doing really well on YouTube right now. So just look up "He Comes to Kill" and you'll find that.
Awesome. Very cool. Um, we have to talk off mic because I do some comic book stuff too and writing. So we'll have to touch
Yeah,
base off mic of that. But
sure, of course.
so now jumping to the superhero side of things, what kind of got you interested in maybe Spider-Man specifically, or superheroes in general?
Man, it just began when I was like such a young age. You don't really even know what's going on. You just get handed things, and
Hmm.
you just that interest immediately sparks you. And I remember specifically one Christmas, my uncle got me two VHS copies of the original animated X-Men series,
Hmm.
and I don't know, they had like two or three episodes on each VHS or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, and so it was like one of those. He also got me a stack of comic books, and it was anything from, I mean, a lot of Marvel, a lot of DC, Justice League, Superman, Man of Steel, Spider Man, I mean, anything you can think of, the hits. But there's a
Hmm.
lot of indie stuff in there too, which at the time, I mean, I didn't know anything about, but like it was just really interesting to see all these different covers and all these different like characters, and I remember being really interested in these stories, and especially because superheroes were like these guys and gals who just were fighting crime, or these villains. I love villains too at an early age
Hmm.
too, just like Venom and things like that. And I just thought it was really interesting because it's all in this big, massive world that expands to other worlds, and
Hmm.
they cross paths every once in a while, and whatever. So it was just like year after year, I was getting handed down these things, different comic collections from my uncle, my grandfather, my dad. And then, obviously when I'm getting old enough to watch movies and stuff, I'm watching these old school, like I think I can't remember what some of the earliest stuff, but I mean like Fantastic Four, the early Fantastic Four and Ghost
Oh,
Rider,
the
just like
the Roger
yeah,
Corman.
yeah, just like stuff like that. You're just watching things and you're like, oh, that's interesting. But also, I grew up on those Fox cartoon
Hmm.
shows, like all the X-Men and Spider-Man, and I watched the Batman animated series.
Hmm.
So I'm watching all these cartoons in general with all the comics and everything paired hand in hand. I collected Pokemon, which I think all that stuff just really like, Pokemon's not superheroes, but kind of hand in hand is just all that pop culture just really distilled that love for pop
Mhm.
culture and comic books specifically. So growing up, I just was immediately a fanboy. I remember when the first Iron Man came out, and that end tag where Nick Fury comes out and is like,
Mhm.
"We're gonna do the Avengers protocol." I lost my, I was like, I went bananas, dude. And at that time, that's 2008, I think.
Yeah,
I was
2008.
like, yeah, so I think I was like a sophomore, junior in high school, and I still was at that time. I knew, what that meant,
Mhm.
and I was like, "This is I can't believe they're doing this."
Yeah.
And now we're at this point where it's like, okay, we're we're in the thick of, there's actually a little maybe too much going on, but it's still just I get excited about all that stuff still.
Mhm.
I'm that little kid in me screams, superheroes and comic book movies and everything and else in between. And yeah, it's very exciting. I've got a son now, so I'm really excited to share all
Mhm.
that with him as he's growing up.
Yeah, I've got 2 kids too. I've got a son
Oh
and
yeah,
daughter. They're both under 2 right now, so they're not quite in that space, but I'm
same here.
trying to start grooming them early. Like I got them like a little Groot stuffed animal and and stuff like that,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they got like Batman outfits, and so
Oh, great.
I've already got my daughter hooked. She's hooked on the Peacemaker intro song.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
fun,
because
yeah. Well, it's
I was binging that series when we covered it, and every time that intro came on, you don't want to skip that intro, and she just loved that song.
no.
So like
Well, it's
now
funny
she still
yeah.
listens to it all the time.
Yeah, it's funny. My kid, my son, he's almost 2, he'll be 2 in, like, 3 months, and he it's funny when he registers when he hears something over and over again, like a
Hmm.
theme song of an intro or something like that, because 'cause he'll be playing with a book or toys or whatever. Once he hears that theme song, he
Yep.
turns his head, and so it's funny because I know exactly what that means, yeah, so
Yeah.
you're watching that on repeat, she's probably like, "Whoa, hey." Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
So, but yeah, I think we're roughly, I'm a little bit older than you, but still about roughly the same generation. I think most people of our generation, they came in through like that X-Men animated series
Yeah.
or Spider-Man or Batman the animated series. And then that kind of was like our gateway into comics and all that. And obviously it's influenced you because like you said, your films all have this like kind of connected universe feel to them too.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, when I started making these films, so I started making them back in 2016, and it was just one of these things where it originally started off as like I wanted to do a one shot like horror film because I
Mhm.
was kind of getting back into filmmaking. Um, but when we got such a good like response and reception of things, and we were thinking of wider long term goals of what we wanted to do, um, it was just one of those things where we're like, wouldn't it be cool if we brought that character back into this story?
Mhm.
And, what if that character was like tied into this and stuff like that? And it just really ended up becoming kind of like a comic book, like Tales from the Crypt is a good example. It's just like
Mhm.
you see like that comic book anthology kind of style going on. But like it's it's just one of those things where we're like thinking, yeah, it'd be neat to bring back some of these characters for a future story, or it'd be
Mhm.
cool to tie this Easter egg into this other story just to show that this takes place in the same world and stuff like that. So it wasn't really at first it wasn't intentional, but now it's kind of like, okay, we have all these, it's a sandbox of characters and settings and locations and scenarios, and it's like if we have the right opportunity we can pull from all these guys and
Mhm.
things that we've done and just make it connect even more in the lore of strange films. And I think really that excitement when you first start kind of diving into that was again deeply rooted for my love of like world building comic books and superheroes, and you're just
Mhm.
thinking like, oh, this is a neat opportunity, I could do this, like, because at the time also 2016, that's really the prime of like Marvel going on too, where
Right.
you're thinking, I mean, Captain America Civil War I think was just coming out, like all these things they're leading up to Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, and you're just thinking like, wow, what a neat thing that I remember going and seeing Iron Man and the Nick Fury
Mhm.
tagline with the Avengers, and now we're about to get the Avengers, like full on blown, like Infinity War, crazy everything. I mean, we're seeing Black Panther on screen. I thought that would happen in my lifetime. So it's just like Kevin Feige did such an amazing thing bringing this whole 10-year plan together.
Mhm.
So for me, I'm like, it'd be cool if I did something like that, just in my own way, So that's kind of just how it all sprawled out, and it's not like every decision's based off we've got to connect, but it's
Mhm.
cool to have those resources to do so.
Right, it's nice when you can pull into, like, "Okay, we need a character for this, but we've got these characters over here. Why don't we look and see what we got already?" And
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I do some of that with my own books as well, and it's fun to be able to have that kind of cross series promotion in a way, and being able to bring in characters from different things, and you get some surprising favorites from the fans too, because I had done two series of my novels, my shared urban fantasy universe, and when I was thinking about the third one, I decided, I'll ask the readers what they think. And when I
Oh.
polled them, and I had a character in mind that I thought they were going to choose. But I threw this other character in there. I'm like, well, let's just put this character in there too. He's popped up a bunch. Let's see what they think. And I just did it to kind of fill out the list. And the character I threw in to just kind of fill out the list was the one that overwhelmingly people wanted to read about.
Oh wow, cool.
So
That's
yeah,
neat.
you never know what's gonna strike people, and that's part of the fun of it too. So then that kind of made me think, like, okay, well, what can I do with this character now? So
Yeah,
it's fun. It's a cool way to challenge yourself in that way too.
for sure, it really is, and I never try to force it because I think when you try to force yourself in that corner, it
Hmm.
can be a little sloppy or just like obvious, But like, but yeah, it is interesting when you're like, oh, that works right there. So in this new movie that we just did, there we actually, because I love superheroes so much, we have our own superhero. I like to quotations, air quotes, in this is his name's the Royal Knight in our
Hmm.
Strange Films universe, and he's like a blend between Batman and Moon Knight. Like he's kind of crazy, like
Hmm.
schizophrenic a little bit, but he's very DIY and just he wants to beat up bad guys and stuff like that. But he has a couple short films on his own, and he's done a couple like just appearances every once in a while. But in this new movie, it's just a background scene where people are partying in a house party, and you can see the Royal Knight just like playing beer pong in the background and stuff like that. And I'm just thinking in my mind, whoever has followed along Strange Films and has maybe watched the Royal Knight, they're like, that's the Royal Knight right there, and that's just like a nice, for me, it's a nice little Easter egg, just to throw in there. It doesn't have to be so obvious, but it's like, hey, we're doing stuff like that every once in a while. So
Yeah. Another thing I like to ask people when they come on the show is what have you been interested in lately? Like, not for work or for podcasts or for films or anything like that, but what are you kind of consuming right now, just kind of for fun, that's gotten your interest? Comics,
oh,
movies, video games,
hmm.
whatever it might be.
That's a good question. Well, I'm so busy, man. Like I work full time. I've got my son that keeps me busy, and then for the longest time, for the last like 4 or 5 months, I've just been working on this movie that I've been just doing, as far as shooting and editing and doing all the marketing and stuff like that
Mhm.
too. And the holidays are coming up, so I really haven't had too much time. Right now, I'm replaying Pokemon Sword and Shield. So I'm kind of getting ready for the Scarlet and Violet Pokemon games because I am a huge Pokemon nerd. So
Mhm.
kind of getting back into video games right now. Like I haven't played video games in quite a while. I get my Switch, and it's kind of I like the Switch because it's a pick up and go. Over
Mhm.
with young kids, you just sometimes you don't even have 5 minutes to yourself. So
Yeah.
it's nice. I can just kind of turn on the Switch and I can play for 15 minutes, or if I can, and then I can turn it off real quick and put it back on, or whatever it is. But I don't know. Other than that, man, I've just been trying to get. I actually, it's funny because you were talking about you wrote novels, which I didn't realize, but I've been wanting to try my hand at writing a novelization of the Strange Films thing. So I've been kind of want to do. We adapted films to comics, but I've been wanting to do the film to a novel,
Mhm.
and that's been something I've been kind of wanting to like pick up and just start going at it because I remember being a kid, I always wanted to write a book, and I was a writer more than anything as a kid. So
Mhm.
that's probably been on my mind more than anything in the last few weeks. But I just really haven't. I haven't gotten started on it yet, but we'll see. But so yeah, I mean, sorry to not give you the most exciting answer there, but yeah, honestly, I've just been really busy, and I mean, work and having the toddler, I'm just not used to.
Mhm.
It's a lot of time, and
I
so
know
when I
that.
get
Yeah.
an extra 15 minutes to sit down to myself, I just, let me sit down, like, but
Yeah, I definitely hear you on that. Like I like video gaming too, but and I've got the PSVR stuff, and I've got all these VR games that I've barely been able to play because soon after we got it is when my daughter started moving around. So like,
yeah,
and she gets so interested in the cables. So like, anytime I try and
yeah,
put it on, she
oh
wants to
gosh,
play around with the cables and stuff like
the
that.
cables.
Hmm.
Yeah, he's playing with the chargers, like all the
Yep.
cables. You can't. I mean, it's like if it's a loose cable, whatever. Like he's doing this thing where he just like likes to look at the end of the cable and just like turn it
Hmm.
around left and right. Like, and he'll do that for like 20 minutes. I mean, it's crazy. But
Yeah.
like it is. I mean, anything I pull out, anything, he just has to try to see what's going on. And so that's sometimes it's kind of like, all right, so
Hmm.
like I don't even know what I can do without him. And then once he's in bed, it's kind of like, okay, I got an hour left before I gotta go to bed. It's like I
Mm.
just kind of need to, rest for a second, turn my brain
Yeah.
off, and catch up on messages or whatever. Watch this show I've been putting off for 3 weeks. So it's just one of those things. But normally, I do try to invest myself into some extracurricular activity or something I'm interested in. Like for a couple years ago, before my son was born, on all my extra free time, I was trying to learn bass guitar, and
Mm.
that was just one of those things. I just like, I'm no musician, but I love music so much, and I was gifted a bass guitar, and I just one of those. It was just one of those things where it's like I can learn. I want to learn something with this,
Hmm.
so every morning and every night I would take 30 minutes to an hour, and I would just practice bass guitar on YouTube, YouTube tutorials, and
Hmm.
looking at bass tabs and stuff like that. And I miss doing stuff like that, but you got to prioritize, I guess,
Yeah.
things that you want to do and work and extracurricular stuff like the podcast things. Working on my podcast, that's one big thing I do every week, but I have to put aside 2 hours and make sure I have someone who can watch my son for those 2 hours. I
Hmm.
can, get the podcast done, upload it, and all that good stuff. So it's just it's a little tough when you got a kid, and I know you know that.
Yeah. So I don't think you mentioned your podcast. What's your podcast all
Oh
about?
yeah. So there's actually two podcasts. The one is the Strange Films podcast, and that's really mainly where we do updates on everything going on in Strange Films, the films and any of the projects we're working on. I bring in guests as far as like people I've worked with before, as far as actors or other filmmakers or anything like that. I also bring in guests who make independent comic books or other filmmakers or anything. Yeah, it's just one of those things. We do commentaries on the films we've already shot and we watch them and stuff like that. So it's actually a newer podcast. I've done interviews on YouTube and stuff for years now, but I finally was able to bring it all on Spotify and Apple. So I'm just kind of
Hmm.
re-uploading old stuff, but I'm adding new stuff too. So there's a Strange Films podcast on Spotify and Apple and other platforms. But the other podcast I like to do, which I guess would be my extracurricular activity, is called It Would Be Nice, and I do that with one of my best friends. His name's John Queener. He's another filmmaker friend of mine, and we we riff on life a little bit for the first half of it. So we take a subject that's like just bothering us in life, like can't get a new job or too many, like why are people taking craps in the public bathrooms? There's 5 people taking craps next to each other, and it has got to be a better way to do to do this in public restrooms. Just things like just random things we put a fun spin on and laugh about, and then we usually talk movies at the last half of it, or we talk our updates of what's going on, and it kind of spirals into random social commentary about anything and everything. But that one's the main podcast that me and him we work on every week, and that's like I said, It Would Be Nice. It's on Apple, Spotify, all the streaming platforms, and so it's a very much of a social commentary comedy podcast. And then if you're looking specifically for Strange Films, we do have that outlet as well.
Very cool. And we'll give you a chance to talk about the links and all that at the end, and we'll include
Hey,
it in the show notes. But now let's talk Spider-Man, because
yes,
this movie came out my senior year in high school. It was like a few months before graduation, and
okay,
I remember because this was back before. you know, this is back before like, buying stuff online became really common. So um, I had like about, and this showed me that there was something big happening with superhero movies, because my circle of friends, there was like 20 of us. Everyone wanted to see this movie, and so like, and I wanted to buy tickets in advance to see it, because I know at the theaters we went to around there that they sell out if you wait in the day of. So I would, and you had to drive in person to the theater to pick up the tickets, because I didn't have a bank account. I didn't have, a debit card or anything like that. So I couldn't shop online. So I'd be driving up to the theater to pick up the tickets. And like for like a straight week leading up to this movie, like almost every single day, there's another person who's coming up to me with money. He's like, hey, can you get our ticket too? Can you get our ticket too? And then we went there on the day of, and we had like, we had like 2 or 3 cars, and like everybody piled in to like the brim, driving everyone over to the damn theater, and then getting everyone inside. And it was a big event. Like X-Men came out a few years before, and that was pretty successful, but nothing really kind of compared to what it was like when people went crazy over this movie when it came out.
Oh yeah, man. There's so many things I can kind of piggyback off of what you just said, because first of all, the nostalgic is kicking in where you're saying you had to go up to buy the tickets, not online,
Mm.
everything like that. And I miss that, man, because now you got to buy. You pretty much had to buy tickets online. And the other thing is about movie theaters and screenings is you had to select your seats. That kind of for and it's like, I get it,
Mm.
but there's just like that raw nostalgic moment where it's like, I miss just going up to the booth, getting a ticket, and then walking into the dark theater and trying to find your seat that you want to, get. Sometimes it sucked. Don't get me wrong, but back in what Spider-Man came out
That was
2002,
2002.
I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, so that was just like such a prime example of like going to the movies and the excitement behind that and everything. But I was a little younger, so I can't remember. Let's see, 2002. I was born in 92, so I guess 10, 11 years old. I was kind of right there, and I remember going to the theater. I saw X-Men. I remember seeing X-Men in theaters before that, and I remember the excitement I had leading up to it, and then watching it in theaters and being like, "Wow!" Like I
Mm.
cannot believe I saw X-Men, like a live action X-Men in theaters. So seeing Spider-Man, it did kind of take that feeling and elevate it to such a whole new level, because seeing him like just, I think the whole dynamics of X-Men, where you could kind of ground it pretty well, where it's like,
Hmm.
yeah, they've got mutant powers and everything like that, and there's some CGI there. But Spider-Man was such like he's web slinging. It's just like the costume, the aesthetic of New York and everything like that, consistently flowing through that. And the Green Goblin was crazy. That excited me even more. And I remember specifically, it's a very odd memory, but I remember driving home from the theater, and I'm looking out the side window of my mom and dad's car, and it's nighttime, and I just kept thinking, I was like, what if I saw the Green Goblin, flying in the sky right there? I was scared of the Goblin because he scared me when I was like that, that young. But it's just funny because I remember that it was such a pivotal moment for me, seeing Spider-Man, a live action Spider-Man, and how awesome it was. And then you just see like, I think everything went into full momentum right after that
Hmm.
movie, as
Absolutely. Yeah.
far as that standard. Um, yeah.
Well, that comparison to X-Men, that's something I wanted to talk about too. The grounding of it, because there was a lot of discussion back then in the fan communities about like, well, how are they going to do the costume, right? Because the idea
Yeah.
back then was you can't just take the costume from the comics and put it on screen. It doesn't look right, right? Because we had memories of like Batman 66 and all that, and it worked for
Mhm.
Christopher Reeve, but it didn't seem to work for anybody else, right? There was something about Christopher Reeve in that Superman suit that it just worked in a way that anyone else who wears the Superman suit doesn't work the same way. Not that classic spandex suit. So there's all this question about like, what are they going to do? Alex Ross did his own kind of like fun design of it, where it was, usually had a little bit of red, but everything else was mostly black. So a lot of people are like, what are they going to do? Are they going to do something like that? And then when Raimi released the first photos of the costume, and it's basically from the comics, except the webbing is raised up on the costume, and we're just like, what?
Yeah.
they're doing it from the comics. What is this? And I remember everybody going, it blew everybody's mind at the time, right? It's funny to think of now, when now seeing, comics accurate costumes is no big deal. But back then, that was a huge thing. Like, nobody expected them to actually use the costume as it looked in the comics.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me being that young at the time, it was I wasn't quite aware of that. I knew watching X-Men that it wasn't like, oh, this isn't like comic what I'm used to seeing in an animated series or comic books, like that's not Wolverine's like, where's his yellow suit? Like I knew that, but like I knew right away seeing Spider-Man, I was like, wow, this is Spider-Man to a T. Like this felt like Spider-Man. And seeing that it was cool. I think obviously the Green Goblin was the one that didn't really have his comic accurate,
Right.
get up. But it's interesting because I'm sure you've seen the test footage of him doing the Green Goblin stuff, and it was the comic accurate kind of
Mm-hmm.
look. I don't know if that would even really work though in the final outcome of the movie. It's interesting to try to put it together, but I'm like maybe it would look too cheesy or something. But it would definitely looks cool in the test footage
Mm-hmm.
of what they did.
Yeah, the look of the Goblin is one of the things that it still sticks with me all these years later. That I still don't like what they did with the Goblin. It looks a little bit too goofy. He's got that big head with the
Yeah.
fixed mouth, and you could even see Willem Dafoe's face through the mesh on the mouth.
Mhm.
So I feel like I'm at Disneyland every time I look at him.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and the rest of the bodysuit, it's like something out of like a Power Rangers costume or something
Mm.
like that. So
Mhm.
the Goblin costume looks pretty goofy to me. And honestly, every time, especially after seeing No Way Home, which I'm sure you've probably seen,
Oh, yeah.
you've got Willem Dafoe in that, and his mask gets damaged early on, and then after that, he's just using his own face. And I'm just like, Willem Dafoe's, got such a creepy face to begin with when he
Yeah,
starts doing those
yeah.
contortions. Just slap some green paint on him, and I think you'd be fine.
For sure. And I think, probably what I'm sure happened in some degree is that I think at the time when they're doing the Spider-Man first that Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man, it was almost
Mm,
kind of like, okay, is this going to work?
yeah.
Like is this Sam Raimi, can you make a Spider-Man film? Is this going to work? Are we going to like is this going to be a successful blockbuster hit? Because that's all Hollywood is like that in general, but superhero movies also at the time, especially, were pretty much like a gamble. I mean,
Right.
even up until the late 2000s, it was a gamble until really the Marvel, you know, besides the Raimi trilogy, I'd say, when Marvel and Kevin Feige stepped in
Mhm.
officially, everything was kind of like, whatever. But anyway, so it was a gamble to kind of go for it anyways, but it was like I think he just or I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But oh crap, what was I even
Well,
saying?
I'll pick up on something you were
Oh
saying, and
yeah, I'm
maybe
sorry, I
maybe you'll
lost
pick
my
back up.
train of
It's
thought.
okay. It happens to me all the time. I know what it's like.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. You're right about the superhero movies at the time because you had the Batman movies, which had gone from the kind of like the dark gothic fantasy of Tim Burton to just kind of being like, to ending up at Batman and Robin. We had Spawn, which was an attempt to be darker, but didn't work, especially in retrospect. We covered that movie recently. Uh, and then you had like the really bad ones, like, you had like Steel and stuff like that, which is just like, super low budget and just like nobody taking it seriously. X-Men took it seriously, but like we said, they made it very grounded. So I think Spider-Man was the first movie, honestly, probably since Superman, that really kind
Hmm.
of took it seriously, was made by people who really kind of loved this character and loved this world,
Yes.
and who wanted to be true to the source material, right? They weren't embarrassed to be. Sam Raimi was not embarrassed about the fact that he was making a superhero movie. Whereas you
Yeah,
look at
and I
like
and
uh sorry, I just want to finish this one thing. Like you look at Tim Burton, he was never really a superhero fan. He's like, I just want to use this to explore the themes.
mhm.
Um, you know, Bryan Singer, not a superhero fan. He's just kind of like, yeah, this is just a paycheck for me, but but I think it's kind of interesting, but I want to make it more serious. And Sam Raimi comes in and he's like, no, I'm a fanboy and I want to show you why I'm a fanboy. And and he put that love of it up on the screen.
Yes, and I think now because I just remember what I was trying to say was we brought, you see that love of it through Sam Raimi, and he delivers his own style
Mhm.
of Sam Raimi films in his direction. You got Tobey Maguire, who is just like lovable from
Mhm.
start to finish. I mean, he however you want to compare a Peter Parker to the other Peter Parkers that's live action and who he is in the comics is one thing, but everyone agrees that I think almost that Tobey Maguire is just perfect for this trilogy. But
Mhm.
I think when you watch Spider-Man 1 and then you watch Spider-Man 2, and I'll quote my good friend John Queener on this. Like, it almost looks like Spider-Man 1 is kind of like a TV movie to
Mhm.
Spider-Man 2, because they like I said, they were kind of like, is this going to work? Make sure, like, we'll give it our all, I'll make sure it works, but it did.
Mhm.
And that, since it worked so well and flawlessly, when you watch Spider-Man 2, everything just looks like crisper, like brighter colors, cleaner, like more special effects and everything into it. Like, I mean, I think you can see the success from Spider-Man 1 to 2, and how I think perfectly honestly, like, Spider-Man 2 has always went down as one of the best superhero movies of all
Mhm.
time, and I think it's just because Spider-Man 1 laid out that risk, that foundation of, can we make Spider-Man? And you can. And
Yeah.
it works so well. I mean, I still watch it. It's a comfort movie for me
Mhm.
watching that movie. It really is. That whole trilogy is. But yeah, it's I definitely it laid the foundation down to kind of show that they can take these risks, and they can go comic accurate to an extent, and they can also do their own thing and their
Mhm.
own direction as well. And yeah, it's pretty awesome still to look back on.
Mhm. So, one of the things, yeah, just want to touch on Spider-Man 2 because we had covered that on the show, and when we covered it on the show, it's one of those rare movies one of those rare superhero movies that still holds up all these years later because,
Hmm.
some of them you look back on and you're like, okay, still pretty good, but it's still very much of its time. Spider-Man 2's got a very timeless feel to it. Like, it still holds up really well. And I mean, you could release that movie today and I think it would still, it would, people wouldn't be like, hey, this feels like it's 20 years old, right? It still holds up really well. This one to a lesser extent. I think this one doesn't quite hold up as well, but Spider-Man 2, there's something magical about that. But going back to this one, what were some things that kind of jumped out at you when you were rewatching it?
Well, it's kind of like what you said, where Spider-Man 2 is really like everything about it is a timeless feel to it. Spider-Man 1, I would say that a lot of it does feel timeless to me, but I think some of the get ups are a little like, yeah, like the Green Goblin is one of the things where it's
Mhm.
like it's an obvious thing. You're like, oh man, they could have done better on that or whatnot. But I don't know. I mean, I think really the nostalgic feel that gets when I rewatch Spider-Man now, it's just the little quirky moments that Peter Parker and Tobey Maguire, um, portrays in
Mhm.
this as Peter Parker, and just like him discovering himself as Spider-Man. It's just a really authentic feel to it, I think, and it's a little heartwarming to see. Like I just love when he's on the rooftop and he's like, go web, and just trying to get
Mhm.
the webs to come out. And it's funny to see a lot of the stuff that happened in this old Spider-Man movie that maybe, comic accurate people would be like, could have been like this or whatnot. But, we all didn't know 20 years later, No Way Home would come out,
Mhm.
and it ties everything back into it. And then they're even addressing the web, his organic web
Mhm.
shooters and stuff like that. I think that's just, it's just interesting to see, from a launching point of this first movie, they just stayed true to what they wanted to do, and it worked so well. But yeah, I'd say the wrestling match is always a fun thing to watch from it. Uh, you know, Peter Parker, just like I said, just his first kind of coming. I really love that hallways fight scene with him and Flash. And he's like, "I don't want to
Mhm.
fight you, Flash," and it's so funny because I was laughing. I was laughing so hard last time I rewatched it, and he's like, "I don't want to fight you, Flash," and Flash is like, "Yeah, I wouldn't want to fight me neither." And I just think of that meme because there's so many memes now with that, like
Mhm.
with like just some of the random circumstance, and it's just a picture of Flash saying that same context. There's so many there's so many memes now out of that first movie with William Dafoe going, "Yeah, I'm somewhat of a scientist
I
myself," and
laughed when he said
like,
that line.
and then they said that No Way Home. I was like, "Come on, this is great."
You had mentioned the organic web shooters, and I remember at the time,
Yeah.
leading up to this movie, there was tons of, like, I mean, Spider-Man fandom is some of the most merciless fans you'll ever find if you see them on Twitter. I mean,
Oh yeah.
and this was before Twitter, and I remember on the old message boards and stuff, people were getting, people were starting to, they were sharpening the knives up when they heard about the organic web shooters. Like me personally, I thought it actually made a lot of sense. Because
Mhm.
I mean, now I've kind of come around on it, but at the time I remember thinking, I'm like, well, organic web shooters makes a lot of sense. And even as a kid, when I read those old Spider-Man stories, I'm like, why did they give him mechanical web shooters? Why not just have it,
Yeah.
come out of him? So I remember thinking that as a kid too. And so when I saw this movie, I'm like, no, that makes sense. That sounds fine. When we got into the Amazing Spider-Man movies and they brought back the mechanical web shooters, and then especially in the MCU when they really focus on the fact that it's about Peter's ingenuity and all that, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I get I get him now. But at the time, I thought
Mhm.
the organic web shooters made a lot of sense. And what about you? What did you think of them?
I never had a problem with them. I really didn't. I thought it was interesting. I mean, again, I was a little younger, so I guess maybe at the time I wasn't kind of like in that debate where
Mm-hmm.
why aren't they using mechanical web shooters? So even when I was just a few years older and I realized that, oh, Spider-Man, like he's supposed to have mechanical web shooters, I still never had a problem with the organic. I thought it was cool. I just
Mm-hmm.
thought it was an interesting point of view, I guess, as far as that world goes. And then even as I got older and I was really more into comic books and I respect the lore of the characters and everything, comic accuracy and everything like that, I still never had a problem with Sam Raimi's decision to do the organic web shooters. I don't even know if
Mm.
he ever came out and said why they went the organic route, but I still think it's just a unique point of view for Spider-Man, and I don't think it's so out of
Mm.
character. I mean, the fact that he gets bitten by this spider, this radioactive spider, or this the spider that gives him powers, and that he's now embedded with all these spider abilities. And I mean, the web, I just felt like it was natural. I thought that at
Mm.
the beginning when I was like kid, I thought that's how it was actually supposed to be. But so yeah, I mean, now, yeah, like you said, with Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield when they did their mechanical web shooters, I thought, oh, I see. It is to kind of prove or to show like his super scientific side of Peter Parker to
Mm.
always have these web shooters on hand, and that that's just one of his crutches, I guess. To keep up his ability as Spider-Man. But I never had a problem with it, and I just again it kind of goes right back to that No Way Home thing where it kind of comes full circle. Where you're
Mm.
like, they're all debating on it. It's just like that was a really fun moment for me, and I'm sure you and everyone else, who never had a problem with that organic shooter.
Yeah, I did love that when he's just like, when he's like, how does it? Where he's like, I don't know. It's just like, how do I do breathing? It's just I just do it.
Yeah, yeah. Does it come out of anywhere else?
uh, Now, I want to talk a little bit about Tobey Maguire, and I think you were right. Like when you were saying that he's really kind of perfect for this trilogy. Um, Looking back, even at the time, I kind of felt this way about him. But like, I always felt like Tobey Maguire is perfect as Peter Parker. Like he
Hmm.
has that, especially when you get into Spider-Man 2, when he's nerding out with Doc Ock in the lab and everything, or in this one when he's talking about the spiders
Hmm.
and he's all like excited and wild eyed, and Harry's like, Peter, only you would think. Why would you think? Why would you think I think that interesting? He's like, who wouldn't think that's interesting, right? You really kind of buy the
Right.
fact that he is this big science geek. Um, Andrew Garfield, like he tried, but I don't feel like Andrew Garfield really kind of nailed the science geek side of things as much.
Hmm.
Even though I do love Andrew Garfield's performance overall, but when it came to the Spider-Man side of things, I felt like, and partly this is probably the script, but Tobey Maguire is just not a wisecracker, right? That's just kind of like not in in his
Yes.
personality, and it's really, really kind of hard for him to do it. The few times when he does try to make jokes in these movies, they just seem to fall flat for me.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, you're totally right. Yeah, he's got a you're right, I think he's a great Peter Parker. I mean, he's just got that awkward charm
Mhm.
that he carries, you know. He's a nerd. He looks the part. He's you feel for him on all the emotional levels and anything in his life, you know. And I think there's a lot about Tobey Maguire that screams Spider-Man because of that foundation he laid out in that
Mhm.
trilogy. But when you look at it as far as an overall franchise with all these live action Spider-Man now, and even going forward in the future, you're like, okay, Spider-Man can be he needs to be a little bit more on the cuff, you know, with
Mhm.
these because he is very, like, you know, with his villains, he's just, you know, he likes to talk smack with them, and he's real
Right.
quick about it. And even I can't think of a specific example with part one, but I know with part two, with he's fighting Doc Ock, he says something, just something like you said, just flat. It's
Mhm.
just like, I just remember rewatching it. I was like, oh, he tried talking smack there, but
Mhm.
it's not like a quick gimmick. It's kind of just a flat, like, whatever. And that's fine for what for what it was in the trilogy of Sam Raimi, because I think, again, even though from part one to part two and three, it jumps as far as quality and maybe being as colorful as it was,
Mhm.
it's still very grounded for what Spider-Man was in this
Right.
whole trilogy. And I think Tobey Maguire holds that pretty closely to
Mhm.
his portrayal of Peter Parker and his portrayal of Spider-Man. You can almost compare it to, like, Christian Bale in The Dark Knight. I mean, it's
Mhm.
very grounded in that world. And
Yeah.
I don't think in that world a very, very animated, colorful, off the cuff Spider-Man would exactly work.
Mhm.
I just think it's just Tobey Maguire did what he did, and worked out perfectly how it was. But yeah, I just think more of the emotional side of Peter Parker and Spider-Man, and
Mhm.
the awkwardness, he definitely the scientist nerd. I definitely he thinks he nails it. I mean, Andrew Garfield, I'd say he was a great Spider-Man. Maybe not the
Absolutely,
best
yeah.
Peter Parker. I think he had a great look to him, but like you said, he maybe just didn't really. There's something about his emotional and scientific side that was like,
Mhm.
eh. But he was a great Spider-Man, and obviously we all love Andrew Garfield, especially seeing him come back in No Way Home. Tom Holland, he's a good mix. I think he's a good
Mhm.
balance of both of them. I think there probably could be better. I think there could be um, things that could be improved either way, but he's definitely a good balance of the two. Tom Maguire, I just think, as when you look at it from being such an early and mid 2000s kind of style, and being as grounded as it is,
Mhm.
and as awkward and charming as it is, I think he just nails it in that sense. But he's definitely not like that Spider-Man we're used to in, like, the comics or the animated series or anything like that. And Tom Holland does a great job with the off the cuff,
Mhm.
kind of talk smack with the villains and stuff like that. And Andrew Garfield was leaning towards that too, as far as Spider-Man goes. But
Yeah, you hit on exactly what listeners are probably tired of hearing me say this because I say it every time these three actors come up. But yeah, I think,
right,
Tobey Maguire was a great Peter Parker, not so great as Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield was the opposite. He was great as Spider-Man. His Peter Parker, I mean, and it's not saying their other interpretations were bad. It's just, like, not what I think of. And his Peter Parker felt kind of like he was a loner or an outcast by
yeah,
choice, right? It didn't feel
yeah,
like
oh yeah,
it didn't feel like he was put upon or he was bullied or anything like that. It just kind of felt like, yeah, he's Peter Parker. He just kind of does his own thing. That's more like what it felt like. But Tom Holland, and one of the things I like about Holland when he does the off the cuffs and the witty stuff as Spider-Man is it's like he's got like a nervous energy to it. So he really
hmm
nails home the idea that this is him as Spider-Man making jokes to cover up the fact that he's freaking terrified.
yeah,
Whereas
yeah,
Garfield's Spider-Man just felt naturally witty. So it didn't feel like he was covering
right.
up for anything.
I agree with you on that for sure. I agree with you on that for sure. Yeah, and then again, back to Maguire, it's just like whatever he was saying in the moment of those fight scenes, it's just kind of like it felt just very written. It felt
Yeah.
like it was just kind of like, well, that was part of the script, and he said it, and
Hmm.
he didn't. It wasn't like that nervous energy or that that true Spider-Man, form of talking smack. It's just he just said his dialogue, and
Mhm.
he's carrying on the scene. And it's not a bad they're not bad scenes. It's just interesting how he talks compared
Mhm.
to the other Spider-Man, and but yeah, I mean, but you do feel for Tobey Maguire throughout the movie. I mean,
Mhm.
he's getting picked on in school, the bus leaves him in the beginning, and stuff like that. Like and Mary Jane, I think the whole Mary Jane arc, part 1, 2, and 3 is so much more emotional than anything that has been portrayed in the other movies. And just like I think you just feel for Toby and you relate to Toby a little bit more, maybe just as like a regular guy and being kind of this nerdy kid and stuff like that. But yeah, when you're looking as far as the Spider-Man goes, it could have been a little better. But it's definitely yeah, it's interesting to see now from the whole point of view with all of them.
I think it's funny you mentioned the MJ thing because that's actually one of the weakest things for me in these
Oh
movies.
yeah.
And it's like these movies don't do either Kirsten Dunst or MJ as a character any favors. I mean, of the three, I think this is the one where she gets the best treatment in the script. But even still, it's not a great treatment. Like her, and like compared to the other ones, like I thought of all of them, I think Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone had hands down like the best chemistry. Like they,
Hmm.
Peter and Gwen, like I was fully invested in that. And then when she dies at the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2, spoilers for a movie that's over 10 years
Right,
old
right.
now, but um, but I felt for that. Even and as many and we talked about that. Like as many problems as that movie has, like the Peter and Gwen stuff of it was just always on point. And even so, when they brought it back in No Way Home, and he saves MJ at the end of that movie,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then in almost the exact same way where he wasn't able to save Gwen, and he almost breaks down after he does it. Like I felt that when I saw, even now when I watch that movie a few times, I still feel that.
For
Um,
sure.
with Maguire and Dunst, they never had that same kind of chemistry that um, Garfield and Stone had, or Holland and Zendaya have. I never really kind of felt it, and just like I think part of this is just Raimi's style. He's Raimi's a cheeseball. I mean, let's be honest, he is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He's a total cheeseball, and that works when you're doing stuff like The Evil Dead, or when you're doing Doctor Strange. I feel like his cheeseball humor and style of writing really works for that. When he's doing it and he's trying to write and he's trying to portray these scenes of like Peter and MJ having these hearts to hearts, it does not work for me at all. Like the scene when
Mm.
they're at Aunt May's bedside and he's like, when you look into her eyes and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, just stop. Just
Mhm.
please stop. Please stop. This is going on way too long.
I can totally see that on your end. I feel like I guess I am a little bit of the opposite though. I honestly kind of thought Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone were a little cheesy watching them together. Maybe just a little too on the nose.
Mhm.
But I will say, obviously, part 2 of Amazing Spider-Man 2, when Gwen Stacy dies, like that is a traumatic,
Yeah.
emotional moment. And then again, what you just said with No Way Home, when it comes back full circle and he says MJ and he breaks down. I mean, in the theater, I was like, oh my,
Mhm.
I feel those things. And even when Holland and Zendaya, I just for I don't know, for McGuire and Kirsten Dunst, there is something that maybe it is kind of on the nose, slight rom-com style, like
Mhm.
cheesy. But again, I think I'm just so invested with Tobey Maguire and
Mhm.
so emotionally attached as far as like his what I'm seeing him go through as Peter Parker and him discovering himself as Spider-Man and his massive crush on MJ. It's kind of just one of these things where I'm like, it's really forgiving for me. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh man, this is what he wants, this is what he needs, but he's also like he's conflicted, he doesn't know what to do. At the ending of it, it is cheesy when he's at the
Mhm.
funeral, and he's like, and she's like, "I love you," and they kiss, and he's like, "I can't be with you." It's just like but and it's just like this back and forth pull the whole trilogy.
Mhm.
But I love it so much. I just think I love watching uh Tobey Maguire go through it. I don't know why. I just do. But I just for whatever reason, not to knock Andrew Garfield, because I think he's a brilliant actor. I think the script was he was just given the script and everything, and but he's a great Spider-Man. But I just think his Peter Parker in those first two movies and a lot of those dynamics of being the nerd, being in love with Gwen Stacy and everything. I just thought they were maybe a little too on the nose for me,
Hmm.
just a little too obvious or cheesy in my end. But I mean, um, it's everyone. But that's a cool thing about Spider-Man and seeing these three trilogies that we've got now. It's just to see like who loves who.
Hmm.
Everyone loves all these Spider-Man and different portrayals of Peter Parkers and everything, and everyone's got their own opinions on them and whatnot. But it's just so great to know that the one we're talking about today is Sam Raimi's original Spider-Man. Just set the the ground floor for it
Hmm.
all,
Yeah.
and I think just no one was prepared for it,
No, absolutely not.
and that's why kind of where I lost my train of thought earlier, where it's like Hollywood and Sony took a chance on this Spider-Man movie because they didn't know. I really don't think they knew exactly how it was going to go down. Um, it did so well, but they kept it at a grounded level. I think they
Yeah.
just kept it at grounded level, and I think that's why it works so well because it's not so like in your face
Hmm.
and so fantasy like in a fantasy where it could have been a little too much in the first round of things.
Hmm. Yeah, I think Kirsten Dunst too. I think when they're writing MJ's character in a lot of these movies, they're kind of they're kind of writing her as a not the best person. Like
Mhm.
she's dating Flash at the beginning when he's obviously a total asshole, and
Yeah.
we never see any reason why what she sees in him for him to actually be endearing to her. When she's with Harry, she's constantly making these eyes at Peter, like when she's talking with him in the hospital, and she's like, "Well, what are you talking about, Peter?" and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, you're dating his roommate. What are you doing?
Oh yeah.
And
No,
and
she's
then
not the best in part one because she even when she's with Harry, she kisses Spider-Man.
mhm, that too, yeah, and she's
Like,
obsessing over
yeah,
Spider-Man. I think the worst is in well, part two is pretty bad when she's
yeah,
obviously in love with Peter, and then she still agrees to marry this other guy who's like the
yeah.
nicest guy on the planet, and then she dumps him
Uh-huh.
at the altar. Like I felt that ending, I loved it at the time when I saw it in the theater, but looking back on it now, I'm just like, oh god, this ending is so painful.
Yeah, it's pretty gut wrenching. She's not. I mean, as far as the MJ character in the
Mhm.
trilogy, she's not a good person. I
No,
mean,
she's
like
not.
she's just like she's bouncing back and forth between Spider-Man, Peter Parker, Harry. I mean, like you said in part two, she's with Jonah Jameson's son, and she's
Mhm.
like even trying to recreate the Spider-Man kiss and make sure that he's not Spider-Man.
Mhm.
Like, but she's just like her mind's always on another guy. I think even
Yeah.
in part three, she's with Peter but she gets back with Harry a little bit. Like they're cooking like food together, and they like kiss, and it's just like it's just all these like she's always like interested in something else that's
Mhm.
keeping her attention and how happy she is. But yeah, I mean, if outside of that though, just I think it's really more of a for me the perspective with Toby and Peter
Mhm.
Parker, and it's like he always wanted MJ. You know he wants MJ. He's having a hard time trying to figure out how to be with MJ. And then when he's even can get MJ, he's trying to balance Spider Man. I just
Mhm.
think all those like really those approaches to his character was great for me.
Mhm. What about James Franco? So I know, first disclaimer: the guy's obviously a scumbag. Now we've come to learn, but
We've discovered,
yeah,
yeah,
but
yeah.
all that aside, I mean, like looking back on these three movies, I think um, in all three movies, like even in Spider-Man 3, which has, tons of problems with it, but I always felt like his performance in Spider-Man 3 was still one of the strongest parts of that movie. And just like it's a
Hmm.
consistent performance throughout all these. Like he really sells it as Harry in these three movies. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think despite who the guy is that we've come to learn, I've always been a huge fan of James Franco and on all of his movies. So seeing him that early on with this Harry Osborn character, I think it was always been a treat for me. But seeing him, like you said, being very, very consistent through all three parts, and his character arc goes pretty dramatic in
Hmm.
those three arcs too. And I think that just makes such a difference because you've got this best friend who turns villain, but ultimately they're friends at the end, kind of deal. And or he's going to help Peter save the day at the end of it, at the end of it all. And I really always liked Harry Osborn, or James Franco as Harry Osborn. I just
Hmm.
thought it was a really good dynamic, especially at the time. He bounces off well with Tobey Maguire, and yeah, I just think it's great to see. I really like him in part one, because he kind of plays like the innocent Harry Osborn. Not really. He's oblivious to a lot of things. There's a
Hmm.
little bit you start to see the jealousy kind of come out with. It's really because of MJ throughout the whole thing. But the part two, I think, is my favorite, where he knows he wants Spider-Man dead,
Hmm.
and he knows Peter Parker is working. He takes photos of him, so there's that heated dynamic between them. But he's cocky also because he's running Oscorp now, and it's just one of those. It's a really great portrayal to see like Harry go from like the student to the CEO of Oscorp
Hmm.
and this vendetta against Spider-Man, and then ultimately discover his father's Goblin Throne and takes on the mantle. I do think part three, it gets a little cheesy with him going through the amnesia and stuff
Hmm.
like that. But part three is its
And the
own thing,
magic butler at the end.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I as far as James Franco portraying the character throughout the whole trilogy, I never had a problem with, and I still
Hmm.
like watching.
I
I
mean,
think
even
he's
even
great.
with all the problems in three, like I thought his dark turn in the after he gets his memory back, I thought he as terrible as that plot line is with the amnesia, like
Yeah.
Franco does such a great job. You could like that pie scene, man. I love that pie scene.
Oh, dude, yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I watched 3, like, I don't know, a year ago or something, and I forgot about the pie scene, and I just was
Hmm.
like, "Oh, man, how devilish of him," you know?
Hmm.
He's just he's a shoot
Although
yeah.
one note about Spider-Man 3, before we get back to Spider-Man. When we covered that, Anthony Desiato, who came on to cover that movie with me, he had watched what's called the editor's cut of that movie, and it rearranges some stuff, and it has like a different way for Harry to kind of come to the realization at the end. So I haven't seen the editor's cut, but from what he was saying, it sounds like a much better movie. So
Really?
maybe, yeah, so maybe give that a try. Apparently, that's on Amazon, so that's apparently a
Huh.
much better version of it.
Oh, I'll have to look into that. I never heard of that.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Huh.
was surprised too. At first, I thought he was talking about some sort of a fan edit or something, but no,
Yeah.
it's a legitimate cut. It's available on Amazon and stuff like that.
Oh,
So,
okay, yeah, I'll have to check into that. Yeah, my buddy John, he defends Spider-Man 3 to the day he dies. He loves Spider-Man 3. Like, I swear to God, like he loves it so much. And I'm not like I don't hate it. I just think
hmm,
it is it could have been a lot better. I
yeah.
know there's a lot of problems with it and whatnot, but it is what it is. But he defends that movie all the time. So I don't know. I'm gonna ask if he's aware of that editor's
Hmm.
cut or not. But yeah, I didn't know about that. It's
So I
cool.
want to talk about Willem Dafoe and Norman. Like
Yes.
I love Dafoe's performance. I think if you're going to get someone, you want someone to play Norman Osborn, Green Goblin. I'm like, it's hard to think of anybody who could do a better job than Willem Dafoe.
Sure.
I mean, he's he comes off as like the as when he's Norman, before the transformation, he comes off as very kind of charming with other people. You could see how this guy's this successful businessman, but you also see the relationship he has with Harry and how hard he is on Harry, and just like in just that very quick scene in that intro when he's with Harry in the car and then he introduces himself to Peter, you see those two sides of him. Boom, right away he establishes that.
Mhm.
Um, and when costume aside, when he's in the Goblin persona, and one of my favorite scenes is when he's talking to himself in the mirror and he's
Yes.
switching back and forth. It's almost like a physical transformation he does.
Yes, and I was just gonna make that note because so William Dafoe obviously is an amazing actor, but that on and off switch that he
Hmm.
just does throughout the movie it's I mean, it's scary, you know.
Mhm.
There's a lot of parts of William Dafoe's performance in that whole movie where I remember being a kid, I was like scared. I was like just like creeped out by the fact that
Mhm.
like it's a really dark performance of and the way he just like gets that low like growling kind of voice and you know he just turns it on and yeah, he just does a really great job. I think it is hard to just to think if there will be another Green Goblin in that vein. I don't think there will be anytime soon because he came back in No Way Home,
Mhm.
which I'm glad they brought him back for that, you know, appearance. But uh he is I just think from the start, like you said, he just kind of has that persona of the charming father like, but he's hard on Harry, but he likes Peter. He's very interested
Mhm.
in Peter, but then he you can tell like he's working on this thing with Oscorp and it goes wrong, so he takes his own hands and it's just like, oh man, it goes balls to the wall from there. And I think one of my favorite performance or one of my favorite scenes, I guess, in the movie is the Thanksgiving dinner.
Mhm.
Because I love when he realizes Peter is Spider-Man
Yeah.
and with the blood, and then he flips the switch like Goblin's taking over. He knows
Mhm.
like something's wrong, and he starts yelling at Harry in the hallway so loud that Mary Jane is hearing it from the living room,
Mhm.
and she's like, and you know, it's just it's so ruthless. He goes from like trying, and even when like Aunt May is like, she slaps his hands like, you
Mhm.
gotta say grace, and he's like, you
Mm.
know, licks his finger, you know, from cutting the turkey. Like just those little moments when Goblin has really kind of taken over himself, for the most part. But it's right after that scene, I think he goes back to that mirror and he's like, "I can't, you know, it's Peter,"
Mhm.
and Goblin's just like talking him down, man. And I just think it's a really great performance, and it's his laugh, his charm, his
Oh god, the laugh.
uh
Yeah.
everything in it. I think he just did such a great job. He is like a dark and kind of scary part of that movie.
Mhm.
But he's definitely, I mean, you can't replace that, you know.
Yeah. My one problem with the Goblin in the movie, it has nothing to do with Defoe's performance. It just has to do with the writing because I don't feel like after he kills the board of Oscorp, I don't feel like they ever really give him a reason to keep putting on the Goblin suit. Like, I mean, I understand the motivation for Doc Ock in the second one, and even in the third one, I understand why. At least Sandman in the first part of the movie, I understand. Venom, I totally understand. Harry, I totally understand. And even in the Holland movies too, I in the Garfield movies, for the most part, they give a good reason for why the villain is doing what he's doing. In this movie, though, I feel like he's just being the Goblin after he kills the board, just because he likes being evil, is what it kind of feels like.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. I mean, you know, because the whole reason why he puts that goblin suit on, or I mean, the glider and
Hmm.
everything, and the serum is because the serum thing that he was trying to test, they disapproved. So
Right.
he was like, "I'll just do it myself," and then it goes wrong, and then next thing you know, you hear the glider is gone, and he kills the board and everything. And I think, yeah, like you said, I think he just likes the anarchy. I think he likes the chaos. I think the Goblin persona just kind of took over at that point, because I think it's really about that speech him and Peter are on the
Hmm.
rooftop talking about, and he's just pretty much saying like, imagine what he's like, because he's telling Spider-Man like, you can be the hero, you can be everything you want for them, but they still won't care about you. He's like, so imagine what we can do together because we both are these like unstoppable forces, you know.
Hmm.
And I think he's got that power, and it just doesn't. It's just gone to his head, you know. I like that about a villain though. I think some villains have to have that kind of just pure chaos
Hmm.
momentum. There is a great uh when you find a villain that's got a great backstory who they were trying to be good people but turned villain, that's a great perspective. But I think maybe for this one, since it wasn't so explained, I think it just kind of went straight into it. It worked out really good deal.
Yeah, it's cool to have a villain who's just pure chaos, and I feel like they should have done something more to build up like the power hungry aspect of his character. I think then it would have made
Hmm.
a whole lot more sense. I just feel like they weren't really. invested too much in why Norman's doing what he's doing. And that was a lesson they obviously learned, because even in No Way Home too, with Norman especially, like his motivation makes so much more sense in that movie.
Yeah, yeah. The only thing that bothers me in No Way Home is that him and Tobey Maguire actually don't talk to each other at all.
That's a good point. And I found myself missing that too, because there's also, and it's one of those things. It's touched on very briefly in this movie, the fact that Peter is the son that Norman always wanted. We get a few hints of that here and there, like when he first meets Peter, and then later on when after they move in together, and he's offering Peter a chance to, and Peter says, "I want to make my own way," and Norman's very respectful of the fact that Peter's doing it on his own, doesn't want any help. And there's this kind of subtle indication that he resents Harry a little bit because Harry's always relying on his father.
Yeah.
And then at the end, when they have that confrontation scene in the final battle, when he says, "I've been like a father to you, be a son to me," like I feel like that is the motivation there, but you have to bring in the fact that he knows that Peter is Spider-Man earlier, and I feel like if I was doing a rewrite of this script, I would probably have the spiders be engineered by Oscorp and have Norman figure it out a lot earlier than he does, and that kind of being the momentum, the fact that Peter has this strength that he always wanted in a son, that Harry doesn't have. But it's one of those aspects that it's not really played up as strong as I think it could have been.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I think one last thing I really wanted to touch on here, and that is I think hands down, I think my favorite performances throughout all these movies is, and the one actor that I don't think you could ever replace, and that's J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson.
Dude, yeah, of course. Consistent throughout everything. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously he's got the look down, he's got the voice down, he's got the attitude down. Very from the start with part one, it's just established that he's, J. Jonah Jameson, and it's just such a treat to see him, on screen and yelling and at Spider-Man and all that stuff. And then I think in part one, my favorite part with him would be where he's like, I think he's for a second he's like maybe doubting, or he's thinking maybe he got Spider-Man wrong, and then there's something that happens, and Goblin comes. Yeah, Goblin crashes into the office, and he's like taunting Jameson. He's like, "Where's Spider-Man?" And then Spider-Man comes, and he's like, "Oh, I knew you two were together." And he's like, like it's for a second right before all that happens. He's kind of like, maybe Spider-Man's a good guy or something. And then when he sees Spider-Man confront Goblin, he's like, "I knew you two were together." He's like, "Shut it, Jameson." He webs his mouth and whatnot. But dude, it's just perfect portrayal, and it's such a treat that we got to see him back in the newer movies.
One thing I missed about it though is they got to bring the flat top back.
Dude, they have to. That is the one thing that's a little bit of a bummer about. He doesn't have that look anymore. I mean, exact look anymore. But yeah, no, he's you can't ask for a better J. Jonah Jameson.
I mean,
he's perfect.
Yeah, one of the things that still cracks me up is when Peter's like, he's like, "You can't say that stuff about him. That's slander." He's like, "No, it's not." He's like, "Slander's spoken, in print it's libel."
Yeah, that's good.
But also one of the things I like too about it is they give him that moment where it shows that he's got another side to him. Like you said in that scene when Goblin comes after him, and he says, "Who's the photographer who takes pictures of Spider-Man?" Right? Jonah comes in, he defends Peter, right? He says, like, I don't know, his stuff comes in through the mail. It's a very small beat, but it shows that even despite this, tough attitude, he's got this softer side to him.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he definitely there's little moments of that throughout the whole trilogy. I can't remember which movie it is. I think it's part 3 though, but I mean, he's wanting to take a photo, and he takes a little girl's camera.
Oh yeah. Sam Raimi's daughter actually in that scene.
Oh, is that really? Yeah. Okay. It's funny. But yeah, no, he just has little moments that are just not so harsh, but it's heartwarming, and at the same time it's true to his character and everything.
Well, I mean, it's really telling that in Amazing Spider-Man 2, because they couldn't get Simmons back, but they didn't want to replace him, so they just have him communicate with Peter through email.
Oh yeah. So it would have been interesting to see how far they would have went with the Amazing
Mhm.
Spider-Man series. 'Cause I know they had such a plan with that
Yeah.
whole franchise of Andrew Garfield. I don't know if they would have been able to bring him back or what, but it is nice to know that. I'll never forget watching Far From Home, that end credit scene where J. Jonah Jameson pops back up, and I was like,
I
ah,
lost my shit in
yes.
the theater when I saw that. Yeah.
I know I did too. I was like, ah, God. So it's so perfect that he was able to come back for No Way Home.
And then, you know, it's obvious he clearly loves this character because he's voiced the character in a bunch of other stuff, like the Spider-Man video game, a lot of the
Yeah,
animated
yeah,
shows. He's come back to do the voice, and
yeah.
it's just such a treat. And I hope they like. I in some ways I like the kind of like Alex Jones version that they used in the MCU, but at the same time I
Mm,
do kind of miss the J. Jonah Jameson, who is like, you know, at his heart he is a decent guy, and so I would
yeah.
wish we could bring some more of that back. I'm not sure how they can. I mean, you know, now that we're gonna get into multiversal stuff, maybe there can be some stuff that happens after Secret Wars and all that, where they can fiddle with the timeline and stuff. Um,
Yeah. Well, they took the modern approach too, where he's doing his news from a green
hmm
screen. It's not like it's not like the Daily Bugle as we know it
right.
traditionally.
Mhm.
So it's interesting how they kind of very much modernized his character
Yeah.
in it. So to see if we see him back, hopefully we do. To see what they do with him, that'll be interesting. But I think he'll always be open to it if they want, if they want him in it,
Yeah.
because like you said, I think he loves the character, and he's he's just got that he's got the iconic name and role
Mhm.
to it.
Absolutely, yeah. One thing too I found out when I'm watching this movie is, and I could this is not a criticism of the movie, it's just more how technology has changed, but the mask on the costume is, you know, at the time, you know, we thought, well, there's no way you can have the eyes move, right? It works fine in a comic book because there's, you know, it's art, it's interpretation, it's. But when you're watching it on screen, you know, you got to have those kind of fixed lenses thing. Although now that we've seen it in the MCU movies where they had the mechanical lenses and they can move, I find
Yeah.
myself missing that so much in these movies now because
Oh
it
yeah.
adds so much to the character to his characterization, his performance as Spider-Man when the eyes can move.
It is nice. I do like it. I do like the new suits, the mechanical eyes, especially. I guess I try. It just goes back to the nostalgic.
Mhm.
When you're watching these old movies, you're like, "This is what Spider-Man was back in the
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
This is how it started it all." And to kind of just, for me again, it's just like kind of goes back to that comfort level of like, man, I remember watching these movies like religiously growing up,
Mhm.
and just feeling like this was what a superhero movie was. There was nothing else to put it by standards, because you're watching these movies and you're thinking like, this is the best superhero movie to date.
Mhm.
Nothing can top this. And then once the MCU rolls in, everything changed
Yeah.
really. But it would, I guess it would be cool to see like some of that modern tech now
Mhm.
with the maybe some of those grounded materials, because I think they did something so right back in the day that sometimes I do think the MCU is lacking.
Mhm.
I think sometimes the MCU lacks some sort of the grounded um levels of emotion, story, and everything. And I just think maybe if there was a perfect blend of all that, that would be really nice to see. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I do like the mechanical eyes and everything. I love seeing the new Spider-Man now. I think it's
Mhm.
when you watch Spider-Man in his modern day suit fighting and everything. I mean, you feel like, man, this is Spider-Man. This is
Mhm.
classic, like from the comics Spider-Man. It's great.
Yeah. Well, I think, and one of the great things that I think this movie did, and you know, Feige worked on these movies too, so I think it's clear he was taking a
Yeah,
lot of notes when he was working with Raimi. Is you don't get to the MCU without first going through Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. Like those movies
for
really
sure.
kind of set the tone for what the MCU would be.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, there's definitely like, even you're looking, you could take the first two Spider-Man movies and whatever superhero franchise you're
Mhm.
looking at, you could take those two movies and just kind of use it as a template
Yeah.
or an example, just to kind of see like how to build a character, how to build an overall story. and establishing a world, and then expand from there. Yeah, I mean, X-Men I thought did a really great job. I still love the original. X2 is even better.
Hmm.
But Spider-Man, I think, just blew X-Men out of the water. Their first Spider-Man, and then Spider-Man 2, it's like a chef's kiss,
Yeah,
man. It's
yeah.
just one of the best. It's one of the best movies of all time as far as superhero movies go.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I
And
mean, I think.
and
Oh, sorry. Go
yeah,
ahead.
I was just saying, like what you said, Kevin Feige being a part of even those early roots with those earlier Marvel movies before MCU was even formed. I mean, you could just now knowing that he did that and seeing the MCU, you're like, yeah, he was taking notes all
Hmm.
along. Like he knew what he wanted to do in the future.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, these movies, and they also they struck the right balance, because you had, up until the MCU, you really kind of had like these two different types of directors when it came to superhero movies. You had people who were not at all a fan of the movies, but could still make pretty good products, like Tim Burton, like Bryan Singer. Then you had, on the other end, you had people who were really big fans, but almost to the detriment of what they were trying to do with the movies, like Mark Steven Johnson, who did Daredevil and Ghost Rider,
Mm,
or Tim Story, who did the Fantastic Four films. Like, their excitement as fans to be doing this almost kind of overrode the needs of a good movie. Raimi
yes.
struck that balance, right? He had that balance between, okay, I'm a fan, but I still understand that I've got to hold back some of my fan enthusiasm to make a good movie. And
Yeah,
and
for
and
sure.
that kind of balance is really kind of what Feige seems to be looking for in directors with the MCU.
Yeah, it's yeah, you can totally see that. And for the most part in the MCU, it has worked very, very
Mhm.
well. Sam Raimi, and I think that's why Sam Raimi was even brought back for Doctor
Oh
Strange. I
yeah.
mean, he's a well known director before Spider Man. He did an amazing job on Spider Man. He did great movies after Spider Man, and he's just one of those guys that he treats any kind of project with the integrity of the art
Mhm.
and the storyline and the lore of everything that's going on too. But I mean, he's going to give it his own style and flair and make sure he's doing a great job for the audiences also. But I mean, Doctor Strange, I thought I love Doctor
Mhm.
Strange Multiverse of Madness. I thought it's such a Sam Raimi flick, but is so fun and colorful and comic book, craziness. I thought it was great. But yeah, so it's nice to see that yeah, he just laid an example out, I think,
Mhm.
like you said, because you can watch the Fantastic Four and Ghost Rider and I mean, Ghost Rider is pretty bad
Mhm.
now watching it, but like Fantastic Four is a little forgiving every once in a while.
Yeah.
But I think it's just one of those things, like you said, it's like they were probably too much of a fan
Mhm.
to because they overlooked a lot of flaws, and we don't know. Hollywood, I know, in studios are always cutting corners on things,
Right.
and the writing on things, or everything's just butchered in the end. But so that could have been very much of a
Mhm.
effect to it as well. But just to see that we even got even and I'll even give Bryan Singer props with X-Men. Just to see those two kind of
Mhm.
franchises do that well and have that balance of some fan uh treatment and grounded storytelling and make sure it's a franchise
Mhm.
like that's all you can really ask for in those early days
Yeah.
of superhero movies.
Well, so I think when you mentioned Doctor Strange, I mean, first off, what a joy for Raimi, because he said, like, growing up, his two favorite characters were Spider Man and Doctor Strange, and he got to put
Yeah,
his
yeah,
stamp on the movies for both of those characters.
yeah,
But
for
also,
sure.
I feel like Doctor Strange as a character is just so much more suited to Raimi's style of directing than Spider
Oh
Man is.
yeah.
Like, it really allows him to kind of flex those horror muscles he had developed with the Evil Dead stuff, and to bring in that kind of like slapstick comedy aspect he has with stuff like Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, and Drag Me to Hell. He can lean on those really heavily, and you can see. I feel like Multiverse of Madness was maybe a little bit hampered with all the MCU stuff they had to do with it, and I would like to. I
Mhm.
hope he comes back to do a third Doctor Strange movie, and it really gets to
Yeah.
be just like a pure Doctor Strange movie, because I think he's going to knock that out of the park.
For sure. I mean, they're so caught up in the multiverse
Hmm.
right saga right now. Like you said, like pretty much every movie on the MCU's map right now is tied into that somehow. But you can definitely see in the Multiverse of Madness, like direct influences
Mhm.
from Drag Me to Hell and Evil Dead and everything. And it is such a Raimi flick. Like, I watched it in theaters and I was like, this might need to be rated R, dude. Like, this is like touching there, it's getting to that point. But what I love about the original Raimi trilogy also, I can't remember if it's 1 or 2. I think it's 2, maybe. But he's like, what do we name the villain? And he's like, Doctor Strange. He's like, no, that's
Oh
Tatum.
yeah,
And it's
that
like,
was a Spider-Man
yeah,
2. Yeah.
yeah, okay. But I watched that. I don't know. It was just years later I watched it. I was like, ah. And I was like, that's just such it's so cool. And then obviously after you directed Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, it's like that's just really cool.
Mhm.
Like you said, he always wanted to do Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, and he got to do both. And he even did an Easter egg of Doctor Strange's name
Mhm.
in the original
Yeah.
Spider-Man trilogy. It's great.
All right. I think that's all to be said about Spider-Man. Any final thoughts you wanted to mention about it?
No, it's just a great movie, man. I mean, it's a great comfort movie. I would even argue it could be a Thanksgiving movie, just with the Thanksgiving theme around it, with the parade and the dinner and everything. But no, it's a great movie. I think there's a lot of, obviously, some stuff you could argue with, or um, whatever. There's maybe it's outdated on certain
Mhm.
things and whatnot. But when you look at it, like, as far as starting the roadmap of who Spider-Man is and how movies can be, it's perfect in a
Mhm.
sense. It's really just set the way. Tobey Maguire is he will always be a number one Spider-Man for me. I just love Tobey Maguire so much. But yeah, it's a great movie, man. Sam Raimi, you gotta love him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even with the criticisms we brought up here, I think more of this movie works than doesn't. And it's mostly,
For sure.
for the most part, like I'd say like 95% of it still holds up after all this time.
Oh yeah,
All
for
right.
sure. Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, man. This has been a lot of fun. So
Oh yeah, I appreciate it.
why don't you tell people where they can find your stuff?
Yeah, thanks again, man. So you can find me through Strange Film Studios. We've got an Instagram I like to promote, Strange Film Studios. On YouTube, you can check us out. And we do have a Facebook page. It's pretty popular on Facebook, but strangefilmstudios.com is where you'll be able to find all the stuff we do. I mean, all our comic books are on there. All of our films are on there. Our podcast links are on there. Any merch or anything like that too. But yeah, check out our films. I mean, if you like I said, we're pretty much influenced by pop culture, superheroes, and 70s, 80s horror and stuff like that. So if you like anything like that, you might like something that we're doing. But it's all for free anytime. You can watch it on YouTube and our website. So Strange Film Studios.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. And I checked out the website while we were having some of our little difficulties before, and it looks really cool. So,
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
so yeah, we'll have the link to that in the show notes. That does it for this episode of Superhero Cinephiles. SuperheroCinephiles.com is the website, Super Cinema Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And, now that Elon Musk is apparently slowly destroying Twitter, I am on Hive, just under my regular name, Per Constantine, PER Constantine. So I haven't figured out how to make 2 accounts on that yet. So I'm just posting Superhero Cinephile stuff under my regular name there. But yeah, and don't forget, patreon.com/supercinemapod. If you subscribe for as little as $1 a month, you get these episodes a week in advance. And you also get the companion show once a month where we talk about comic books, graphic novels, all that fun stuff. And please make sure, even if you're a subscriber, if you want to help support the show, give us a review on iTunes, rate and review. It always helps us out. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.